My name is Kelly Yarbrough, and I'm the Director of Community Programming at Prairiewood Retreat and Preserve in Manhattan, Kansas. Normally, I'd be busy coordinating our public event series, like yoga, open trail days, and artist receptions. But it's a weird time. In-person public programming is out. But I can't help noticing that some things haven't changed. The earth is still spinning, and spring is upon us. We still need sunshine and fresh air. We need connection to each other and to places that matter. The Places Between Us is part podcast, part walking tour. Conversations from a distance with artists, poets, educators, and changemakers as they take us on virtual walks through their own special places.
It's a moving experience to listen to them, and more people, we got to figure out how to get more people to know about this orchestra. My name is Becky Katzenmeyer, and I am the owner, along with my husband, of Prairiewood. We know Mr. McClendon because he has been two of our children's orchestra teachers. Anna Grace had the opportunity to play her senior year as a violist with them, which was just an incredible experience. She was super nervous because the quality of the musicians around her was so high, but it really pushed her. It was like going to any professional concert. There was murmurings of this, you knew that if your kids were going to be in a performing arts class at Manhattan High, that not only is there this great music education, but that the conversations that they were having in class were meaningful, deep, important, safe. Really, Mr. McClendon was the first person she would turn to if she was having something really difficult happening in her life. It's a huge blessing to families, because I think as you have kids and you get older and you have ideals of the kind of parents you want to be, and reality hits and you're not all of what you wish you could be for your kids, and you're so grateful for the other people that come alongside and have those voices that are filled with compassion as well as wisdom. And we need to get beyond a health crisis so they can play again, and play hopefully all over Kansas, because they're really phenomenal.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing?
My name is Nate McClendon, and I'm calling today from the den in our house, in the back corner of our house. So hopefully the internet connection stays solid for us. So at the high school, I teach the orchestras. I'm the orchestra director, and we have 3 orchestras there. And I'm also the director of the jazz band. So 3 orchestras and a jazz band. And then additionally, I teach at Lee Elementary School and Woodrow Wilson Elementary School, 5th and 6th grade orchestra.
Tell us where we're walking right now and why you chose this place to share with us.
Yeah, so this is the front entrance of the high school. So walking up the main steps in the lobby. And I chose this because this is the jungle, so to speak, that I go to pretty much every day. Obviously, you're looking at now, it's summer and it's empty. The schools look like this for a couple months now, but typically it's just roaming or filled, packed with students and all kinds of stuff going on. So we went up the front steps, and now this is what we call the commons area. And that's where all the students would congregate. That's where they would eat. They would come out here and study. That's just where students hang whenever there's time to be hanging out. So I just thought we'd kind of walk through that area and then maybe kind of come back towards my area where the orchestra room is, or where the performing arts action takes place.
You've received a lot of accolades, where your students have.
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of success lately, and it's been pretty exciting. Most recently, just before school got out, canceled, I should say, with the COVID, we were performing at the Kansas Music Educators Association state conference, and that's kind of a big deal in Kansas. You have to audition to get in, and they, at least for orchestras, they only take about 2 or 3 every year. And you can only audition every other year. So we've actually performed 3 times in the last 6 years. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. But we had just done that. We had just performed there late February, right before spring break. And the really neat thing about performing there is you get to perform for all of the other music teachers in the state. So it's kind of a big honor. Aside from that, we've gone on a couple regional and national festivals. Last year we had went to a regional festival in Nashville and took all of our orchestras there and did really well. We had won that festival. The year before that, or not the year before that, probably 2 years before that, we had gone to a national competition in Chicago and we had won that. And I don't know, a year or 2 before that, we had went to another regional festival in Dallas and won that one as well. So a lot of success over the past couple years.
I learned about you recently that your background is not in orchestra. What is your background? What are some of the jobs that you had before you came here?
Sure. Good luck trying to get the short version out of me.
Maybe I'll make the short version later.
Yeah, right. You can make it short. So I moved here in 2002 from Las Vegas. And while in Las Vegas, I was a band director for 10 years, doing marching band, concert band, jazz band, the whole thing. So I'd done that for 10 years and then moved out here to Manhattan, Kansas. And the reason I moved to Manhattan is I came out here to work for an association called the International Association for Jazz Education. It no longer exists, but that's what brought me out here. That was an organization started by Matt Betton, and we did things around the world. We supported jazz education programs around the world, and that was kind of fun. It was just very surprising that it was hosted in Manhattan, Kansas, because we were doing things in New York and LA and all the time, but our business was based here in Manhattan. While I was working there, I got the call to ministry, and I left music education completely to become a pastor. I was an assistant pastor at Westview Community Church, and I did that for 3 years, and then I went back to teaching. And so after being a pastor, I was hired at Manhattan to be, I was one of the assistant marching band directors, the assistant orchestra director, and the director of the orchestras at both middle schools, Anthony and Eisenhower. So that's how I kind of got into orchestras, because that's what the job was. And when you're in a town like Manhattan, there's one school, one job open, so you do what they ask you to do, which is great because I learned a lot about orchestra, and I've never had more fun teaching. I am a musician. I love music in every way. I love making music. I love sharing music. In town, I play alto saxophone with the local big band called the Thundering Cats. So we play around town all the time. And then I'm in a band that plays regularly in Kansas City every weekend. It's kind of a cover band, an R&B band. It's called Too Proud to Beg.
Yeah, sounds like you stay busy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about sort of your approach to teaching?
Sure. And I do get that question a lot, because people hear these students and like, wow, like that group is phenomenal. What did you do to get them to sound like that? And usually it's like teachers or other musicians, and they're wondering, like, technically, like, what tricks do I know about music that I tell the kids to do that makes music sound like that? And the truth is, it's not that at all. Kind of like I said earlier, I'm not even a string player. I mean, I have to study it and I understand the instrument, but it's not my forte. Um, so the first thing is, it's not just me. There's a lot of people that contribute to making our program what it is, and that goes from the private teachers in town, to the other teachers in the district, and as well as, we have the gold and silver orchestra program. So students start playing string instruments at a very young age here. So by the time they get to high school, they have a lot of experience and practice already. I kind of see my job is, what I have to do is to create the culture that brings out the best in these students, create the culture that allows them to become more than just a kid that plays the violin, or for the orchestra to become more than just a group that plays some music. One of the things that I kind of think about is, like, the kids have to understand, like, the why we do music, why we play. And once you figure out why you're doing it, that's going to change how you do it. And then, from that point on, everything changes. And so we've reached these levels not because we're just talented or have technical expertise, but we play for a different reason. It changes the way you look at the people around you. It changes the way you look at the people you get to play for. And that's all in the why. When I came back to teaching, I had never thought that I was going to teach again. Like, once I went into ministry, I thought, like, I was done with music and education forever. But when I was hired at Manhattan, my philosophy had kind of changed. I'm here for the students as people first, and building an orchestra program second. So that book, yeah, it's a leadership book that's often used, like, in companies and businesses trying to build camaraderie and all of that within a corporation. But there were some really interesting takes on how we view ourselves as people, and I thought my students would benefit from it too. Yeah, it was called Leadership and Self-Deception. And first semester, let's see, the chamber and the symphonic orchestra studied that book. And really, like, the two main points of that book is, one, you have a problem, and the problem is that you don't know you have a problem. So that was, like, the first main idea. So we explored, what does that mean? We have a problem, and the problem is that we don't know we have a problem. And the second point was this idea of self-deception. And the meaning behind that is, each of us in our world, in our life, we know that there are good things that we should be doing. Like, situations arise all the time that we know there's the right thing to be done. And oftentimes we don't do that thing. We do something else, or we do nothing at all. Sometimes we just don't do the right thing that we know we should do. And once we do that, we then have to we have to recreate our world to kind of gloss over or ignore the fact that we didn't do the thing that we knew we should have done. So then we start blaming other people and our surroundings, and we can find reasons for why we didn't do the right thing that we should have done. So as we explore that type of idea, it's so easy to bring that into the music, because music is nothing but an oral study of the history of people. That's all it is. It's just, music just captures all of the ideas and values and cultures and scenarios that have happened throughout history, which is just people. So studying people, I think, helps us to tap into that. And then once you do that, a musical phrase, you understand that it's saying something. It's not just a bunch of notes that might sound good, but there's actually meaning in that phrase, in those notes. So that's the kind of weird thing that we end up doing a lot.
It does seem like you treat the classroom as a true community.
Yes, it happens. It happens all the time. For example, we have a wide range of talents and abilities. I have kids that play better than I play. I have students that are like just really, really advanced. And then I have some students that just started playing a year ago. So we have that whole range of students. And one of the big things I'm into is having those students pass everything down or through each other. And I see the students also as a resource for the program as a whole. So it's not uncommon to come into the orchestra room at lunch and find one of my more advanced students working with, say, an intermediate student, helping them learn something. And this will happen between students that aren't even in the same orchestra. And not only does that help us get better from a musical standpoint, technical standpoint, but the kind of camaraderie that it builds and the way it causes those students to see the program, to see each other, that's the thing that excites me. And then another way that it's really taken off, we started a program, and this was started by one of our students. We call it the violin lesson program. Basically, the concept was we wanted to offer free private lessons to kindergarten and first grade students. So the parents didn't have to pay money for a lesson or even buy instruments because it's such a cost. And at that age, kids are involved in so many activities. Oftentimes music doesn't get looked at because it's too expensive. I don't want them to just try it and then drop it after a month. So the kids got together, put this program together. And so we started it at Woodrow Wilson last year. We had 27 kindergarten and first grade kids signed up, and my kids would go every night and do lessons with all these little kids, teaching them how to play the violin. At that point in time, they raised the money to actually buy the instruments, and they donated their time to do all the teaching.
So you mentioned that you were in ministry, and I'm curious to know how you balance that with being in a public school classroom.
Yeah, so I am who I am, and my faith is going to shape who I am as a person. I had mentioned earlier that this second go around as a teacher, I was looking at it as I see my students as a person first and as student musicians second. And that's an idea that comes from my faith and my experience as a pastor as well. My heart, I guess, is really in, I want these students to grow up to explore and see a bigger picture so that they can make good choices for their life and for the world around them. Now, what is a good choice? That's a very deep question. I'm not here to tell them what is right or wrong. I'm here to create the experience for them to discover what's right and wrong. They know I was a pastor. They know what my faith is. If we're talking about something and I give an opinion, if that opinion comes from my faith, I might tell them, well, the reason I think this about this is because here's what I believe in. But it in no way is to influence what they believe in. I make that pretty clear when we talk about things.
So we actually have a second setting here to tell us where we're walking in this video and why it's special to you.
Yeah, so this is the golf course at Wildcat Creek. This place is really special to me because this is where I get away. I love being out in nature, but I live in the city. So aside from my yard, there's not much nature, but I love getting away. And this is actually where I come to think. So as a teacher, as a pastor, just as a person, coming out here, this is like where I just get to reflect on life, what I'm doing, what I need to be doing, and just kind of let my mind calm down and just listen for a while.
So I do want to ask you about a letter that you sent out to your students in the wake of the death of George Floyd and some of the protests that have been happening across the country. I wonder if you could just describe what that letter is addressing and why you chose to write that.
So basically, there's kind of two reasons why I chose to write that. One, these kids, like they're my responsibility, not only to teach about music, but as an adult role model in their life. Like it's my job to show them the world, help them have experiences in the world that are going to help them build their worldview. So I had to address it. And then the other thing that's particular to me is I also realize that my role as a person of color, particularly here in Kansas, I may be the only person of color that any particular student might have in their life. You know, they may not have other people of color as friends or family members. I don't know. And also as a teacher, they may not have or have had a person of color as a teacher, and they may not. They may go all the way through college and not have one. I don't know. It depends on what they study. So I know that I bring a particular voice and experience that they might not have access to. So I kind of owe it to them and kind of like to the world in general to share how racism, things like that, how those things have manifested in my life. Again, because they may not have access to that point of view. So yeah, I chose to write them a letter, even though, you know, we weren't meeting, school was out already. But what voices are they getting to hear? The media is going to be all over it. And so you're going to get all these opinions from all kinds of people, but we don't know those people. You know, I don't know the person you're interviewing on TV. I don't know the person who wrote this article. And when we get that kind of information from people that we don't know, like it only sinks in so deep. Um, when I speak to my students, I can say things or share things and it hits them differently because we know each other. And that's, you know, you talk about change, like that's one of the biggest things is we just have to know each other. I've shared stories of what it was like for me when I've been stopped by cops, and I've had guns pulled on me twice. And that's, I mean, that's an incredibly terrifying experience when cops have guns drawn on you. And my students know me and they're like, why would anyone pull a gun on you, McClendon? You know, and I had to explain, like, you guys see me as you see me, but people that don't know me, they see 6'4", 270 pounds, you know, fear can be there.
I was particularly struck by the hopeful attitude that you brought. You didn't shy away from naming specific incidents and experiences that you've had that are very troubling, but you also ended with hope.
Yeah, how to have hope. I grew up poor, so I was poor my whole life. And one of the blessings about not having money is you get used to like knowing how to exist without having money. If we're talking about like say these racial incidences, so things like this happen, you see what happened to George Floyd and it upsets you and it makes you angry and it strikes you deep in your heart in this place that is always targeted, that has always been hit. I know I have gone through these kind of pains, but I have still continued. Like I'm 50 years old now. So that's like 45 years of overcoming. And so I look at this and I'm like, I'm so proud of these oppressed people, these frustrated people, that they don't give into that anger. They don't give into that deep sorrow, and that they respond with, we are still going to work to make this better. I am very proud that specifically these African American people respond with love and hope to the hate and the violence that they continually experience. But I wanted to mention one other thing about the hope. The other place that I draw that from, though, is also my faith. My faith, which teaches me to love and to love everyone, shapes how I look at all of this as well. And again, that is a personal thing, but it's a thing that's also bigger than me.
In this letter, you do talk about the word evil, but you define evil as a belief system, an attitude, an influence that moves us to act in ways that devalue and destroy life. And you talk
Yeah.
that word can have religious connotations, but you're thinking a little more broadly or beyond. It's relevant beyond just a religious context, right?
Right, because whether or not you come from any type of faith background, evil still is here and still does what it does. Whatever you want to call it, however you tend to conceptualize it, evil is really kind of like an enemy of life. It just wants to destroy. And the bottom line is that it is what we're up against. And that's the hard part because we don't think about that kind of stuff. We think of, the enemy is the system, the enemy is the police, the enemy is policies, the enemy is systematic racism, the enemy is capitalism, the enemy is whatever people want to call the enemy. But those are all like secondary enemies, and we can we can address those things. We can look to change policies and rules and all of that, and that's good, and we should. But if we don't address evil, evil is just going to like change its mode of operation. It's just going to move to another way of causing us to destroy. And when I think back to all the things that have happened, um, evil used to look like, when we're talking about racism, it used to look like people hanging from trees. And then it was having hoses and dogs stuck on you and having crosses burned in your yard. And then it turned into segregation, and some people can go here and some people can go there, and you have to sit in the back of the bus. And each of these times we kept changing rules. We freed slaves, and then we made all kinds of different policies for them. Then we had rights to vote, and then all of a sudden, civil rights come in, and we keep changing the policies. So now it's you see abuse from the authorities. It always just changes. And so, yes, we should look at fixing the policing. There is a problem there, and we need to address that. But we can't fool ourselves in thinking that that solves the problem. It's great that people go and protest, and I was happy to see my students there. But don't be so easily satisfied in thinking that making a protest, getting a law changed, it doesn't change the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is what we have to start looking at. If we just keep putting out small fires, that big fire is just always there. It'll continue to burn. So here's what I get asked. I have lots of friends, mostly white friends, that ask me this question. They say, like, what can we do? Like, everybody right now is like really sensitive about what's going on, and everybody wants to see us get better. But here's the answer that I would say, and again, it's shaped by my faith. It's the only way I know how to answer this question. So I hope you don't mind me kind of quoting scripture. Um, Jesus said, like, the greatest commandment was to love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And he was combining those two things, and I think that's really important. Um, so we are to love with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's not only how we're supposed to love God, but that's how we're supposed to love each other as well. So if you're asking me how you can make this problem better, then you're not using all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul, and all of your strength. You're trying to find an easy way out. You're trying to, like, if I can just throw money at something, make it like we do that all the time in our culture. Let me just give money to this problem, and then maybe they can make it go away. It doesn't work that way. The solution is in the struggle to find that answer. Rather than asking me what you can do, what you need to do is use all of your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength to figure out how you can make this different. People are the influencers of people. Um, so, like the way the COVID spreads, one has it, then two, then four, then eight, then six, it just keeps doing that. When you get yourself right, when you come to a place of peace, when you start to overcome some of these things, guess what? You start to influence those people around you, and then they start to influence. Like, that's how it starts to spread. So you have to do that work.
It's beautiful how this conversation is kind of come full circle in a way, because I started asking specifically about teaching in the classroom, teaching philosophy, and then we've gotten into current events, but they're also not that different. How you approach these things, it always comes back to considering how you treat your neighbor.
Right. Yeah. How you love. That's the thing. How you love. And that's kind of like at the root of what we do at school. Like that's kind of the heart of what the orchestra is. Um, that's what makes it special. That's what makes the music sound the way that it does. It's what motivates kids to practice. So again, that question, like, why do they sound good? Well, they sound good because they practice. Why do they practice? Because they found that extra thing. Like it's not just about the notes on the page. It's all this other stuff that we've spoken about. And when everyone is going through that same process and those same experiences, when you come together as a whole, you look at each other differently because hey, they've gone through that struggle or they're going through this and that. Then the sound they make is very personal. Like the individual sound and music that each student is producing is a very special, unique thing. And then they get to all contribute that to one big product. Like when that happens, you can actually feel that. Like on the stage, you can feel like this is no longer just the piece that the composer composed. This is the piece that they composed, and we are breathing life into it. We're making this thing a real thing now. And that's magic. One of my favorite things is listening to the students. We do playing tests and they all have to play by themselves sometimes. And that's an incredibly scary thing. I talk them through it. I'm like, you know what? We all do this. It's just part of our culture. It's one of the ways I help them deal with fear and start to break down some walls that have been built up for years. I do this because, okay, now we've all heard each other play by ourselves. We know who's really good and who's at a beginning level, all that. So, okay, it doesn't change anything, doesn't change your value. But one of the most beautiful things is when you hear a person and they played at the beginning of the year and they didn't play that well. And then you listen to them a couple months later at the end of the year and they have to play in front of everybody again. And you can hear the improvement. Maybe it's still not great, but you hear that improvement. There's not a better sound in the world than that sound of a person that's gotten better. And the whole orchestra like recognizes that. And then they'll clap for that person. Like that sound, it may not win you an award, but it's past that.
So I have the letter that you wrote to your students here. Would you be open to reading a short excerpt from it out loud?
Yeah. To my students, I'm always mindful of the fact that I'm your teacher. I see it as an honor and a tremendous responsibility to have the opportunity to pour into your life in efforts to help you become the best version of yourself. This is why we spend so much time on things seemingly non-musical. Who you are as a person is always the most important because knowledge and skill is slave to character. I'm also aware that I may be the only person of color, specifically Black male, that you've had as a teacher and may ever have. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that people fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. It's important for us to communicate and to know each other. As depressing as things may seem, as personally exasperating and heartbreaking it may be, I am hopeful. Hopeful that we grow, that we ask questions and decide to care about what others experience. Hopeful that we will decide to examine our own thoughts and attitudes and not be so easily satisfied. The pursuit of liberty and happiness is not just an individual quest, but a collective one. Not only am I hopeful, but also I'm emboldened in my commitment to do what I'm made to do, which is to create and to share experiences with you so that you will discover your best self. It might be unrealistic to think the world can change anytime soon, but as an orchestra of 100 plus people, I think we can.